Hello again, welcome to Ask G. We're into week 2, day 1. We're now on to requests. I've had a request from Dan Terry, one of our members. Thanks Dan, I appreciate the request. And also Dan is one of our better players at Ombersley. He's a low single figure handicapper and has asked a specific question about his short game. He's described it as a chub or a duff. I think it could also be called a shot that's fat, or basically where you catch the ground before you make contact with the ball. Today's theme I've called Simple is Brilliant. It's not my saying, it's something that I've picked up from elsewhere, but it's something that I strongly believe in coaching, in every aspect of the game. In actual fact, I think the simpler we can make things, certainly as a coach to the pupil, the easier it is to put into practice and the easier it is to repeat, and I think it's repetition and consistency. So on to the short game then. And I've brought an arrangement of clubs. None of them are mine. My clubs are at work. I've got a rescue club, a 5 rescue. I've got a chipper. I've got a 7-iron. I've got a pitching wedge, a 50-degree wedge, and I've got a 58-degree sand or type of lob wedge. Simple being brilliant. One of the starting points is I think that too many people, too many players complicate this part of the game. And I think the first thing you have to have is a stock shot. A lot of people talk to me about opening their stance or opening the club face or adjusting the ball position slightly, and I tend to ask them why they do it. Their answer is that sometimes, for example, they'll say to me, well, it hits the ball higher, and I'll then ask them, well, higher than what? And if they don't know what it goes higher than, I'd ask them why they're trying to hit it higher in the first place. The starting point for me with a short game that's consistent is to really just breed one type of method and then adapt it onto all the clubs. I personally like to keep things, as I said, as simple as possible. So I'm going to start to talk to you today. We can go into more detail later, but I'm going to start to talk to you today about what I call a connected, or we call in the business, a connected swing. To have a decent short game, you need to start. I'm going to pick a 7-iron here. You need to start with a connected method. The term connected actually goes back to lesson 1 that we did on day 1 of this series. We started with some exercises. I showed you some exercises with the club up here and the club round here, and I finished with an exercise where I had you with your palms back to back. Dan, this is a great exercise for your short game. The idea was that you put the back of the palms against each other, and you pushed the back of the left hand away with the back of the right, and it created a good muscle movement. This is actually the beginning of every golf swing that should take place, but it's the beginning of the connected movement. And really speaking, if we worked on this last week, and you should still be doing 15 of these, remember, every morning, it actually creates a really good chipping technique and the base to a short game technique. Connected basically works on the principle that the tool, i.e. the club, and the machine that is the body, is working in conjunction with the brain, and that all 3 factors are working together. Connected in this instance has the butt of the club into my belly button, and I'm working on making a movement where the club stays connected to my body throughout the swing movement. The chub or the duff, the early contact, tends to stem from where the hands and arms work independently of the upper body, and they tend to separate, and that causes that early contact with the ground. In particular with the wedges, the more lofted clubs, it can be where we try and get the club up in the air and create a scoop type technique where the hands work too much or the arms work independent of the upper body. So connected is really important, and this principle and this training technique will teach you the correct movement. I'm not a lover of working too much, and it's not because I'm in my back garden. I'm not a lover of working too much with the ball initially. I'm a big believer that if the technique is correct, if the movement's correct, that you just simply put the ball in front of it. So in some ways, being restricted into a smaller area is actually a good thing. I've literally just pulled my mat away from the back door, and I'm using my mat and the shallow connection that my club makes with a one-piece movement gives me that nice sound off of the mat each time I make contact, as opposed to that coming down and quitting on it where the hands and arms have worked independently. There's going to be a massive change take place when we go out onto the golf course when we eventually get out there, because we've just come off of a really wet, soft winter period where that movement of coming down into the ground, that slightly steeper angle of attack and impact can work, and we do get away with it. As the ground gets harder, we're going to get a reaction off that if we start to make that movement, and it's not going to be beneficial. It's certainly not going to work, and it's not going to be consistent. So now's a good time to get into the habit of making that connected swing movement, regardless of the club that you're choosing, and trying to get used to the feeling of that shallower movement into